I work for FORTINET and they've been there for 9 years. So what I thought I want to share with you today is the robustness of these types of networks and the importance of why we need to build robustness into these networks as well. It's the important part. That said, I always like to use the word robustness. It's the ability to withstand overcoming and adverse conditions and obviously rigorous testing. So cybersecurity, is a very similar thing, and how we obviously do testing and rigorous testing is because with cybersecurity networks, no matter what network, it actually is an ever-changing network. So, when we talk about ever-changing networks, we talk about, it's evolving continuously. We have a new thing with digital transformation in these networks. Things are changing inside the medical faculties, treatment medical facilities, where traditional old analog type systems are now becoming more digital, becoming more online. We have a lot of huge introduction of IoT devices in these networks as well. And with IoT, that brings a whole new dynamic of how we should be securing these networks as well. So just the fact of 2020 for the review is in the medical faculty, medical industry, is that there was a huge increase of breaches in the healthcare vertical. Confirmed and have been confirmed by multiple people overseas as well as in the US, of breaches taking place and data breaches in the networks where people have been trying to steal personal data of the patients in these networks and these hospitals. Something else that's taken place is the amount of cyber attacks in healthcare. We've seen a couple of attacks in 2018, 2019, even to the national health system in the UK, where some of the devices were attacked from headless devices like printers. There's been a huge report on Internet of Things that now we should start securing Internet of Things. How do we do this? That's the important part as well. Then basically in 2020 or end of 2020, we saw a huge data breach. It almost took 2 days. It took the network down for 2 days. In this healthcare environment, many patients could not access the data. Many patients could not be admitted to hospital. Many patients that were in the hospital, basically their records were lost. Historical data was lost as well. So this is a huge impact. And I think a lot of people didn't realize the cost that to that hospital or to the hospital system of these type of breaches that took place at the time. So like we might talk about any other institution, financial insurance, healthcare is as important as any other institution like banking and finance as well, because of the amount of data that is kept, the personal information that is kept, and obviously the sensitivity of the data that is kept as well. Over and above that, the amount of increases in breaches from 2019 to 2020 has increased. We see numbers from many, many parts of the world. Specifically, even from South Africa, I think we have had 1 or 2 reports where information has been leaked out. This information obviously has been leaked out internally. People have stolen the data and obviously used it to their gain. So I think we have to just be aware that these type of cyber criminals are there, they're out there, and they are going to basically use this data against you. If we move on to healthcare organizations facing the increase of security challenges, I'll try and put it into 3 different categories. There's obviously the part of ransomware, where it's typically a user or a device is attacked one-on-one and it prevents access to the data. It actually shuts that device down completely. There's the threat from the internet today on a daily basis. There's expanding footprint of digital surfaces taking place. The increasedness of borderless systems. Hospitals now basically doing things like remote operations and remote education. This also opens hospitals to vulnerability types of attacks. And then the IoT type of environments, where these IoT devices, heart monitoring machines, diabetic machines, it can be defibrillators, call it what you want. It can just be a monitoring system for a person at home, can now be obviously attacked from a cybersecurity hacker. They try and shut this device down for whatever reason, and then basically might even be paid to do this as well. So these types of attacks we've got to be very, very careful of and very, very aware of as well. When I move on to the digital attack surface, we typically talk through four things. It's the sophisticated threats that are taking place. I mean, sophisticated threats have advanced. Over the years, we've seen a huge increase of the digital surface. The security edge has now gone out further to the networks, where typically smaller hospitals and clinics now operate on a smaller scale, but at the same time, they're still connected to a larger organization, hospital, or that medical center. The complexity of ecosystems, with these modern digital devices coming into the hospitals and clinics, they're always all connected to the internet inside the clinic or hospital. They have access to certain amounts of data because they feed data upstream. That means if they are connected, then they're vulnerable to attacks as well. And then in certain countries, like in Americas and in Europe, there are compliance from government to actually report on this type of information. This information has to be kept secure as well, because it is personal data, and it's very sensitive personal data that has to be secured. And government has been very, very loud and outspoken about this of late. So we're seeing a huge increase of people trying to protect this data and protect this data for good. So what is healthcare, and how do we obviously protect healthcare? So, you've got to look at 4 different elements. The patient records are very, very sensitive and still very attractive to a lot of hackers trying to steal this type of information for whatever reason. There's remote access into these hospitals, it might be via Wi-Fi network, it might be via a VPN type connection. Is that connection secure? It has to be. Think about the options that are people hacking into hospital, what they can do. There's obviously been huge problems about pandemic situations like COVID, the over-fluctuation of patients coming into hospitals, managing these patients entering into hospitals, the records of these users, of these people. Also looking at hospitals operating 24/7, because that's typically what they sell as a service. And ensuring that even though they operate 24/7, everything is always guaranteed, no matter if it's a payment system, if it's a heart monitoring system, if it's an X-ray machine, all these systems are 24/7. And then, like mentioned earlier, is that we have a huge influx of these medical IoT devices now coming part and parcel of the network, of the hospital network or the medical care network. So legacy IT is being kind of taken out the network, but these new devices are being put in. But at the same time, we also find is that the cybersecurity skill sets inside these hospitals are obviously diminishing as well. So that is something we're trying to address, by training people, getting them up to speed about cybersecurity, and understanding that the conversions between OT and IoT is taking place in a dramatic rate, even in healthcare sector as well. So why medical systems and devices? The legacy operating systems are quite archaic. They're still in use in some instances in some countries that I visit. Medical equipment themselves are very, very expensive, and their life cycles are stretched and sweated for over 5 to 10 years, even longer sometimes, because people don't have funding to obviously build new wings of hospitals, build new theatres, and obviously provide new updated technologies, and no matter what sort of practice they're in. The traditional security solutions of the past have been a problem when talking to medical care facilities. Something we try to educate the hospitals and the clinics on is, how to secure the environments, how to do it. Obviously, a better way and more effective way and more cost-effective way is important. And your typical devices being developed today sometimes have security software built into them, but it's not great. Sometimes it's a very dynamic and open keyword or key password or key phrase that can be known to the public and attacked. So a lot of times we actually say, look at the IoT device, change the password of the IoT device, and make it answer to a higher manager, like typically a network access control server that FORTINET have today. So at least when the device is influenced or manipulated, at least it then goes and comes back on the network. We can say, well, you've changed the password or something's happened, and at least an alert has been given to the network. And, remediation, if a network is attacked and brought down, how do we bring that network back up as fast as possible? Was anything stolen, like data records of patients? Was any equipment damaged in this process? Is the hospital operating 24/7? Is the network back up online? And I think this is the important part, because I always see a hospital more critical than a bank. So this is something that you need to consider when building cybersecurity solutions for Medicare. Something we have seen is medjacking. Interesting one where cyber hackers have obviously got into things like heart monitoring machine. It might be a dialysis machine. It might be, like an X-ray machine where they try and manipulate the information on that system for whatever reason. So again, this is just a simple example of type IT securities having the right cybersecurity infrastructure and being secured. And then last but not least is the securing of medical devices on a scale. So we've seen a huge uptake of many of these devices now being sold. And these medical devices, from bedside devices to kind of passage devices to the theater type devices, all have to be secured no matter where they are. So when you are connecting hospitals between each other, those connections between the hospitals have to be secured as well, because you can also share this information. This information is becoming more and more valuable to the clinic, because especially when there's a pandemic, is how do we transfer patients from one hospital to the other? Do we have enough medical equipment or medical devices in each hospital to service the amount of patients we're taking in? And there's many other factors that actually take place in this area. Technology from healthcare, we kind of put them into 4 different parts of the network. So there's the network access control systems that actually access the data. There's the segmentation of the firewalls inside the network, how we segment each part of the network. It might be different practices like dental, oncology, orthology, whatever. And then there's this thing, strong authentication of IoT devices, like I mentioned earlier, is when an IoT device comes in the network, who are you, what are you doing, what do you want access data to, and what data are you feeding me? And this has to be continuous. Over and above that, there's the software-defined, networks between each, we call it SD-WAN, between each branch or central hospital or branch office or clinic. That's important because between these branches, we can have a secure and obviously connection, and obviously ensure that the data is secured as well. So FORTINET offers a digital experience where we can actually offer these cybersecurity technologies in different areas. So we look at the user and devices. Today, we can look at the known and the unknown, as well as the trusted devices. We obviously know what these devices are. If it is an unknown device, we can challenge this device. If we move further into the network, we look at the campus, the branch office, the hospital itself, the clinic or the operating theater. We've got to ensure each part of those parts of the hospital are secured and connected. It might be connected by a switch or a Wi-Fi type device or a 5G type device in a remote region or via the wide area network. We've got to ensure that that is defined. And then you've got to look at the computing and public cloud environment where public cloud has become a reality in hospitals and healthcare. People are looking at how we put more of the services and applications into the cloud. Are these applications and services secure in the cloud? The answer is they should be, because a lot of the times the service providers don't provide security, but you can actually buy these security services in the cloud that protect the data and protect access to the data. A lot of these systems, because they're so high in resourcing and powering of data, you've got to look at hyperscaling. How can hyperscale the data, especially if you look at things like X-rays of the human body? How is this X-ray information shared between branches? Because you obviously got to use a lot of other resources to share the data. And then on the edge, as well as the security edge, you've got to look at when a user logs onto the network, who's the user, who's the device that they use. If it's a tablet or digital device, is it challenged? And then with that said is that, when the device is challenged, who are they? What do they want to do? What data do they want to access? And with that data, what are they going to use the data for? So there's obviously a track and trace functionality that you need to do and keep in mind. So if you talk about specifically the digital attack surface of typical users and devices, I'd like to focus on that today because I think that's important. These all devices that enter the network have to be trusted devices. And how do you challenge them? We have a term called zero trust. And with the zero trust is that you've got to look at your selection of how you can combat your solution from being breached. So if you take the insider threats, typically, we have things like users trying to access, user information, data leakage protection, and obviously, the information in the cloud. On the right-hand side of external threats, we look at how we actually combat and define and build a network, next generation firewall that actually is secure. We look at your security gateways. We look at the web application firewalling, the data, the content, how is that secured? Can the data be stolen? Can it be obviously breached as well? We look at the endpoint devices, the printers, the X-ray machines, the hot machines, whatever, monitoring machines, and how they answer to the network and how they're secured as well. So it's very important when you're looking at a solution, it's kind of the two-pronged approach, is both solutions, internal and external, should actually have the same sort of security posture and the same security strength and hardening in that network as well. So FORTINET's pillars, we kind of match that, what I've just discussed, is we look at the convergence of network security at the edge as well as inside the network. We look at how IoT and OT networks are coming together with IT networks as well. So the convergence is really taking place. And then we look at how we secure the applications, the devices, the user information, the user itself, and the many devices that user may have coming into the network. A simple example I always like to use: if I'm a user accessing the Wi-Fi network on the nurse's lounge or floor, and I need to go to the data center, I shouldn't have the same rights. I should have different rights because you're now securing what that device is doing in a different environment. So that's very, very important. And then implications of consumer medical devices has become a huge discussion point. And, typically if you're looking at your two-factor authentication, so when a device comes on the network, how do we secure that device? The typical way I was doing it in the old days was username and password. What a lot of these medical devices now asking for is to actually do a third factor of authentication. So we term it as three-factor authentication. With third-factor authentication, you now basically get a token that is put on a mobile device or a user device. Within the device is challenged with a username and password. The third part of the authentication gives them to come and actually ask for a token. And that token is refreshed every 60 seconds in the network as well. Then the user that's using that device can then access the data. Then the nice thing about it is who the user is, what data he wants to access, and the rights of that user as well. So we have seen this discussion point playing out. And it's been quite an interesting discussion when talking to hospitals and clinics, because I think they've never thought of this technology actually existing and being available to them to use in these environments. So another interesting one has come up now is AI-driven security operations and systems. We typically have a product today called the FORTINET Deceptor. The FORTINET Deceptor actually looks at OT devices, IoT devices in the environment. We look at the network, we look at the information transversing across this network. We also can do things like plant honeypots, that's more of an old term, where we can actually create a deceived environment. A user or a hacker can expose themselves, and then we can eliminate that threat very quickly. So I term it as almost a sandbox on steroids. That means that we can start manipulating the environment where people are trying to hack the system, they expose themselves and they show who they are. The nice thing about this system is it actually gives us a number of things. It gives us a way to create decoys and lure people trying to hack the system. We can actually then see how the behavior takes place and analyze the behavior. Once you've done the analysis of the behavior, we can actually then build a patch or a protection mechanism to actually combat that. And then the nice thing about the FORTINET Deceptor, it's part of the FORTINET fabric today, which is integrated. And then over and above that is what we're now doing is we're now looking at these, what we term the unknown threats that are currently taking place and trying to combat them as fast as possible and shut them down. And ensuring also these IoT devices that are on the networks are not being manipulated and threatened as well by these types of hackers. And everything can be shipped back or sent back to a central management system like a SIEM. The SIEM information can then be used to do reporting and obviously management control and report back to the board of the hospital or the clinic, as well as the IT team for further planning and innovation as they go forward. FORTINET Security Fabric has many of these products built in their solutions today. I mean, from a fabric management center, we have the SIEM product, we have the SOAR product, we have a both knock and sock product. We definitely try and talk about zero trust access networks, as well as network access control. This is very, very important. Over and above that, we support the adaptive cloud security environment as well. We have products that obviously not only from a hardware point of view, but also can be purchased off the cloud providers. And over and above that, our strength is the FortiOS, the Forti operating system. And we've obviously then done a big push on security-driven networking as well in the past 5 to 6 years, where we've actually brought a whole new combination of our FORTINET fabric offering as well. And last but not least is FORTINET's open ecosystem with our partners. When we actually do the open ecosystem, we work with partners in that space. Some of the ecosystem partners we work with, and just to give you an example, is with AWS, Azure, Microsoft, Cisco. Some of the APIs we've developed with some of our competitors, funny enough, or some of our consulting companies. We've also done a fabric development operations team that actually works with multiple of other partners as well. And we're carrying on seeming to be open and they're kind of transparent to the other vendors as well that actually want to develop this type of technology. This testing does take place vigorously with the FORTINET team as well as the third party we tested with as well to ensure that we actually provide the right security solution to the marketplace. So considerations and guidelines for healthcare, typically try and develop an overarching security plan in your environment and ensure that you have a good governance structure, as well as accountability for staff, as well as how the systems work. Ensure that all devices in the network can be, have access and basically ensure their risk posture as well. increase the visibility of these medical devices and on the edge of the network or in the network itself, no matter if it's connected via a wired or wireless device. Ensure that the solutions that you're deploying on the platforms have an automated reinforcement solution and backup plan. And last but not least, is always ensure that your strategic relationship with your security technology provider is sound. Ensure that they're always updating you. And we, as FORTINET, have a unified security approach to this type of network and environment as well. So hence the reason for my presentation today. If there's any further questions, please let me know. I'm available to answer any questions, and we will be on the panel later. Thank you much for your time, and I appreciate your information on this.